Have you ever thought, what's the point of engaging in a creative hobby, of creating art, of writing, of gardening, if you felt like there was no one for you to share it with? If you felt like ultimately no one was going to see it, no one was going to enjoy it, so why even bother? Maybe you have a talent for something, but you feel like there's really no point in doing it if it's not leading to some potential outcome, if it's not part of your job. If you've ever felt that way and you feel frustrated or saddened by that because you are a creative person, you have talents, you have gifts, and you want to share them with the world, then please listen until the end of this video where I'll be discussing and grappling with these ideas that many people face and offering some potential solutions and mindset shifts that can help get us out of our own way. I think there's a lot of validity to that feeling because ultimately we create for one primary reason, and that is self-expression. So the very act of creation can be incredibly powerful, incredibly healing, incredibly cathartic, and all of that is typically amplified when it's witnessed by another person. So some things are totally personal. If I'm journaling, it's not intended for anyone else. I don't want anyone to see it. But if I write a really fun, creative story for myself, yeah, that's fun, that's great. And I'm going to be left with this feeling of, oh man, I wish more people could see that. I wish I could share it. And so when we don't feel like we have that outlet and that ability to share, sometimes we start to get into the thought process of why even bother? What is the point? Even though it's something that brings us a lot of joy personally. And it's something that a lot of other people may really enjoy too if we work up the courage to share it. So even though I've always loved to write, for a long time I felt, what's the point? If I'm not pursuing a career in writing, I'm not working towards a specific goal. Every time I have a plan or a goal for a book or a blog, I don't follow through with it. So it's like, what's the point of even doing this? Even though my whole life people would ask what my dream job is, and I would always say writer and mom. But as far as a career, it was always writer. But my career path wasn't actually working towards that. On the one hand, I wrote plenty in my journal. I always do. And occasionally I would go to the park and write some poems or write a story or write an article that I thought would be helpful. But I wasn't really sharing it. And it ultimately left me feeling worse about myself because it's like, oh my gosh, I have all this work and no one sees it. And that can get really discouraging. I recently had conversations with several really talented artists who were experiencing the same thing. So one of them is an incredibly multifaceted photographer, woodworker, painter. He has all sorts of art, but he's kind of at the point of like, yeah, that's a hobby. It's kind of an expensive hobby because he needs materials and supplies and all of that. And he's like, what's the point if I'm not going to sell it, if it's not going to become a job? And then another friend who's an illustrator and she's looking for a job in that field, but it's like, what's the point of just illustrating if I don't have paid work? And so that's why I want to talk about this, because I feel like it's something that comes up for a lot of creatives, this feeling that why bother if we don't have an audience, if we don't know if anything will come of it. But I do believe there is something so powerful and impactful about the creative process itself, whether or not people see it. And I think that trusting the creative process and leaning into the thing that brings us most joy is how we eventually, ultimately will make something of it. If we go in with the mindset of what's going to come from this, what is my outcome, that can be really helpful in setting goals and achieving certain benchmarks with a lot of things. But if you're a creative person and you find yourself stuck feeling like, oh my gosh, what is the point of this? I think it's a really healthy practice to detach from the outcome, detach from why you're doing it, and simply do it because it brings you joy and because it's a creative outlet that makes you really happy. And if you're happy and joyful, you're more likely to show up in the world and take action on the things that will lead you to success and money and all of the things that you're hoping to have. And I think the more that we do it, the more that we engage in the creative process, the better we get and the more confidence we have. So part of why, even though I've always said I wanted to be a writer, part of why I have not pursued a full-time writing job, even though there have been plenty of times that I've looked up writing jobs, is because part of me feels like I'm not good enough. And I don't have the experience, and I don't have a portfolio, and I don't have any of that stuff because part of me thinks, oh, who am I to do that? Even though the other part of me knows that I'm a very talented and skilled writer, there's a limiting belief there. And I think that comes up for a lot of people as well. But the way to increase our confidence and overcome limiting beliefs with any facet of our lives is to do it, regardless of whether we're getting paid to do it or not. It's an investment in something that could be fruitful in the future. So having these conversations recently was really interesting for me because when I started my spoken word journey, so if you look around my YouTube channel, you'll see lots of spoken word poetry. And when I began my journey, I wrote this poem called Silent Story. It actually was my first spoken word poem. It's the first poem I ever performed live, out loud, at an open mic, the first open mic I've ever done. And it really was about this theme of feeling like a silent story. So art that doesn't see the light of day doesn't matter. And then as the poem goes through, I realize it does matter, and the creative process is really important and fun and enjoyable, and that's kind of what I'm elaborating on today in this video. And at the end, I will have some takeaways of what I think can be helpful for creative people who are having this block or limiting belief. But the poem starts with a silent story. Does it even count? A fallen tree in the forest does not make a sound. And eventually I come to realize that's not true, and it does count. But what I thought was so fascinating was in this poem, there's a line that says, "A million words in my journal, meant for my eyes alone. They count for nothing if they can never be known." Which is true. I have over 1 million words in an online journal that I keep. Not online, but a Word document. But what I thought was so fascinating about that is fast forward 6 months, I'm posting more poetry, I'm writing a lot more poems, I'm going online and sharing them and getting a lot of joy from it. And then I wrote a poem called Numbers Game, which was about the fact that now, or at that point, as I was writing, I was thinking about how this would come across to people on the internet, to my followers on Instagram. I was thinking about the numbers that I was going to generate, the number of views, the number of likes. And that was at the expense of the quality of art. I was focused on, okay, how can I make this viral? How can I make this be seen? And so in that poem, there's a line that says, "Numbers count for nothing if absent is the art." Which just means that it doesn't matter how many people you reach if the quality of art is compromised. More on that in a moment. But what really struck me was look at those lines in juxtaposition. So one says, "My words count for nothing if they can never be known." And the other one says, "Numbers count for nothing if absent is the art." So I was personally struck by the fact that I had inadvertently, unconsciously, unknowingly used the same phrase, "counts for nothing," but in totally opposite meanings. And what I've realized is that the second poem is absolutely more correct. It doesn't matter how many people I reach if the quality of art is diminished. Now, when I said more on that in a second, it's because obviously we are living in a very tricky time in the world where the things that go viral, the videos, the blog post, the memes, whatever, that reach billions of people may not be top quality art. Some celebrities become famous based on how they look, based on their strategy online, not necessarily based on their skill or talent. And that is kind of sad. It also just points to the fact that oftentimes work ethic trumps talent. But that's a discussion for another day. And work ethic trumps talent when it comes to making money or building a business, but not necessarily in terms of personal fulfillment or life success, feeling abundant, feeling good about yourself, feeling in love with your life. So let's separate those two things and acknowledge that, yes, we live in an age where we can sacrifice the quality of art if we're really focused on the algorithm and playing the game and keeping users on the platform and all that good stuff, which I understand is a necessary evil when it comes to YouTube and Instagram and all of the things that I personally am doing as well to leverage, to share my art. But at the end of the day, it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is the creative process and how it feels for you. So I think that's a line that all creatives really have to walk these days, is finding the ability to package quality artistic production into a format that will reach people in today's day and age. So it's a challenge for us all, but challenges often make us more creative as well. So I think at the end of the day, if it makes you happy, do it. I remember I was 22 and I had just moved to New York City, and I went to Starbucks to do some studying. I was in grad school, and this guy sat down next to me and started chatting to me, and I thought, oh, this is how love happens in New York City. Just a stranger sat next to me at Starbucks, and he was a writer. And I told him how I loved writing, but I didn't really do it. And he looked at me and was like, don't stop. But I had stopped. I'd stopped because I had been traveling for a year before grad school. I stopped because I was learning Italian and I didn't really write that much in Italian. I stopped for a lot of reasons because it was like, why bother? What's the point? I was in grad school. That's not what my focus was on. But I still hear his voice sometimes when I get sad with myself that I haven't been writing. And now I write a lot more, and it's amazing. And it is incredibly fulfilling, even though I don't know where it's all going. I don't necessarily have a plan, and that's okay. So I think at the end of the day, if it makes you happy, do it. Just do it. If the art makes you happy, do it. If it's expensive, try to find creative, cheaper, and more inexpensive, cost-efficient ways to produce the art. And I actually wrote a poem about this theme as well called Happy Heart, which was inspired after a conversation with a mentor of mine where I was going on and on about how sad I was because I really want to write and I just don't know where to start. And she was like, just do it. If you have the yearning, just do it and don't worry about the outcome, which I think is huge. Because if we're so focused on how much money are we going to make, how many people are we going to reach, we lose the passion, we lose the drive. So now I do spoken word poetry, not with the intent to become a famous billionaire spoken word poet, which would be really cool, but I do it because it's so fun. Because every time I perform at an open mic, it lights me up. I'm good for the week. I'm high on that. Every time I post a video on Instagram, even if I don't get very many views, if I don't get very many likes, it still brings me such joy to see the poem and hear the poem in a video format. And even if one person comments like, wow, I like that, it makes my whole day. Now, some things we may like to do, but it's not necessarily a burning passion. So for example, I really love doing voiceover. I think they're so fun. I teach clients how to do voiceovers, but knowing what all goes into becoming a successful voice artist, I don't really care that much about it. I would not be sad if I never become a voice artist, if I never have a job as a voice actor. That's okay with me. Even though I love it and it brings me a lot of joy and it's really fun, it's not the deep passion that I have for writing. If I never do any writing, that would make me sad. So all of this is to say, and what I really want you to take away from this video, the reason I'm sharing all of this is Because I really feel that the what's the point? Why bother? Attitude is not useful. It's a limiting belief. It's an excuse that blocks us from our dreams. It blocks us from pursuing our passions and spending time and effort onto the things that we actually really enjoy, and probably the things that we're made to do, that we are meant to be doing. Now, again, this doesn't apply to everything. I don't feel the same way about voice acting as I do about writing. So the why bother attitude is kind of appropriate for something like voice acting, because I'd rather the people who really, really care are in that space. But the why bother attitude is harmful for me when it comes to something like writing. And so what I encourage you to do is think about, at the end of your life, if you look back and would be sad to think that you didn't spend more time doing that one thing, go do it. Go do it as much as you can. Go do it and have fun, because you won't get that time back. As I'm saying all this out loud, I'm thinking about my mom, who is on hospice care and she's preparing for the end of life. And she is an incredibly talented baker and cook. And her whole adult life, we've been telling her, like, hey, you need to sell these goods. She did have a dream of selling her baked goods at farmers markets or selling them to restaurants. But she never wanted to start a restaurant of her own because she was worried that that would take away from the passion. It would take away from the fun, because now there'd be the pressure of making money and it would be a job. So even though she never made money from her cooking, and she probably never will, it's something that she does still almost every day. And it brings her such joy. And she does get to share it. She gets to share it with her children, with her husband, my dad, with her friends, with our neighbors. She gives baked goods to people that she meets, and that brings her such joy. So I think that now, and in talking to her at the end of life, when she's looking back, thinking about her cooking, she doesn't regret that she never made money from it, and that she might never make money from it. She is so happy that she spent so much time doing it. So I think it's really important that we detach our creative pursuits from money and from the outcome in general, and lean into the joy that it brings us and the joy that it can potentially bring other people, trusting that we will contribute to society in a meaningful way if we're doing the thing that lights us up. So part of what makes this tricky, at least for me, is I feel like my writing should reach the whole world, because I feel what I'm saying is inspirational and motivational. It could help people. And so sometimes I feel this pressure that, oh my gosh, I need to put this out in the world. And I do think some of that pressure is healthy, but at the same time, it can become debilitating. And I don't think it's where we should start. If I start with, how can I affect change in the lives of millions of people with this poem, my poem is not going to flow the way that it would if I say, oh, I'm cooking breakfast right now. Oh, that's a cool rhyme. Oh, let me write that. Let me put that together. Da-da-da-da. Oh, wow, this is a cool poem. I think I'll share it. And those are my best poems. Those are the best writing. And from conversations I've had with successful creative people, that's what they all say. Create from the heart, and then you can share. So that's something to take away from this video as well, is create from the heart without expectation. Do it for joy, do it for fun. And then when you have a product that you really like, then you can share it for fun and see what happens and see where it goes from there. I'm not saying we don't have a responsibility to give back to the world, because we do, but it will happen naturally when we're aligned with our purpose, when we're aligned with the thing that we're meant to be doing. And you'll know what that is based on how you feel. If it feels easy, if it flows, if it feels natural, that's probably what you're meant to do. And everyone around you is going to benefit from you doing that thing. So think about the thing that lights you up and go freaking do it. Just do it. No questions asked. Don't stop yourself. Don't overthink. Don't say, what's the point of this? Just go do it and see how it feels. And if you want to stop at any point, you can. But most of the time I hear people say, man, I used to do that thing. I used to paint and I really loved it. I should get back to that. Or, oh, I used to garden. I don't know why I ever stopped, but I was so much happier then. So let yourself be happy. Give yourself permission to have fun and enjoy life, because it's short and it's long. So why be bored? Why be doing things that we don't really want to do? Based on everything I've said, I feel called to share my poem Happy Heart, which I will also link in the video description. This is really not the intention of this particular video, but it feels relevant to me right now. We make life so complex, but let us simplify. What makes your heart the happiest, even if you don't know why? What sets your soul on fire, even if you haven't got a reason? That thing of which you never tire, even with the change of season. Don't stop doing that. Relish in the joy it brings. There's no more potent force than a vibrant, happy heart that sings. So even when you're feeling lost, or oh so uninspired, find the sparkler in your life that hasn't yet expired. Whatever it is for you, never stop, I pray. Don't let your heart's true longing be the thing that gets away. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in, especially this far. If you enjoyed this video, I would please encourage you to like it, subscribe, share it with someone that you feel needs a little boost, that needs to hear this. Comment for me what you thought about the video, any takeaways, any suggestions you have, and I wish you all of the best in your creative pursuits. Thanks again.